city. So for those of you that haven't joined us before, we're going to give you a little bit of an intro to let you know what the space is about, and we'll run through the plan today. And if you're joining us for the second time, hopefully you'll have a bit of a sense for how we're going to go through the session today from last time. So firstly, I'm just going to do a little bit of a quick intro. I've just got some slides to show you what the plan is for today and to talk you through it. So the Derby City Forwards collaboration space is very much aimed at trying to provide people who are working with older people in the city, or who whose role involves working with people who might be at risk of falling, to find out a little bit more information about work and things that happen in the city, and to hopefully give you a chance to ask some questions and get some more information. So hopefully, as you're aware today, we've got a couple of guest speakers who very kindly given their time to talk to us today. We've got Peter from Warmer Derby in Derbyshire, who's going to talk a little bit about energy advice and warmth and the link to falls for their work. I've also got Danny from the locality service at Derby City Council, who's going to talk a little bit about his team's work and how that links to falls and older people. Very much throughout the session, we want to try and encourage questions. So as we're going through the session, if you'd like to put some questions in the chat, you are more than welcome to do so. Each presenter is going to have around 15 to 20 minutes to do their presentation, and then we'll have a short sort of Q&A session for each presentation afterwards. So during the presentation, feel free to put some questions in the chat, or if you've got some things that you'd like to ask afterwards, we'll give you a chance to put your camera and your mic on if you'd like to ask a question. Just a little bit of housekeeping bits for you. So the session is being recorded, so hopefully that's okay with everyone, but just to make you aware, the session is currently now being recorded. We are going to share that afterwards as well. So if for any reason you aren't able to stay for the full session, or you've got any colleagues you know who haven't been able to make it today, there'll be a recording that can be shared afterwards. We just ask you to keep your microphones off during the presentation, and then obviously we'll have a chance for you to put them on during the Q&A. We know that some people are joining us during lunch, so if you can't keep your camera on, that's absolutely fine, no problem at all. So just before we get started with the first presentation from Peter, just to give you a little bit more of a background to this space. As I say, it's the second time that we've met as a group. So the vision for the space, as I touched on the start, is to try and give people from loads of different sectors working in Derby City the opportunity to come together, share and learn about things that happen, and hopefully start to make some connections. So once we get started, if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, please do feel free to do so. If you'd like to put your name and your role and where you work in the chat, so you can see who else is in the space and maybe start to make some connections, we definitely encourage you to do that. And when we get to the end of the talk today, we'll give you a bit of an idea of how you can give us some feedback and how you can become more involved in this space if you'd like to. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of what we're going to go through today. And we're going to hand over first to Peter. So Peter Burgess-Allen, who's joining us from Warmer Derby in Derbyshire today. So I can see you on my screen, Peter. So over to you. If you'd like to start sharing, if you've got your presentation, I'll let you get started.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. Yeah, thanks, Alistair. Nice to see everyone, and thanks for the invitation. I'll just try and get my slides up. Okay, for some reason that's displaying quite small, but there we are. Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, so I work for Marches Energy Agency, and we run a program called Warmer Derby in Derbyshire, which is in its coming up for its 6th year, which is a sort of fuel poverty support project funded through a thing called Energy Redress. We've got a couple of partners involved. You can see some logos there, which is Citizens Advice, and one on the right is the Derby Bosnia-Herzegovina Association, who also kind of co-host the refugee centre in Derby. So that's a really positive relationship, and we're working with a small organisation in Normanton called Sahara as well. So that's just our little network. So I'll press on. Yeah, we're just a quick introduction, really. We're based in Shropshire. We've been around for about 26 years, actually, but working in Derbyshire the last sort of 15 or so with various local authorities across Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire. Basically, our objective is to support householders to stay warm and well at home, and we do a bit of work around climate change and energy efficiency, reducing carbon as well. So that's our sort of remit, really. So yeah, cracking on. Health impacts of cold homes. I just thought I'd just summarise the sort of the health connections with with what we do and what we're trying to prevent, really. So there's quite a lot of research showing that heart attacks, strokes, pulmonary issues such as asthma and COPD all go up dramatically in the winter when it's cold, and particularly in cold homes. There's a very clear link between cold homes and those ailments. Mobility problems, and this is where the falls issue comes into play, really. Arthritis, other disabilities are exacerbated by prolonged periods in a cold home. And what I mean by cold home is really anything kind of below about 18 degrees. Getting below 16 degrees is where the health impacts really kick in. You can see on the top there, that little coloured slide is we've got a little thermometer cards that we give out, which indicate sort of the healthy temperatures and where we'd recommend people, the temperatures we recommend people warm their homes to sort of stay out of risk without overheating, without expending too much money on the bills. So yes, anything kind of above 16, 18 to 21 is our recommended temperature range. Obviously, somebody who's very immobile might want it a little bit higher than that to stay comfortable, but that's our general recommendation. Yeah, just working down that list a bit further, mental health issues obviously get exacerbated. Depression and anxiety made a lot worse, obviously, if you're sitting in a cold house. And child attainment as well, so perhaps you can imagine children in a big household, perhaps cold bedrooms, can't concentrate, need to work in the living room. Not ideal scenario, I imagine, for getting your homework done. So kind of locks in perhaps a little bit of disadvantage from the start if you're growing up in a cold house. It's not going to do your prospects any favors, really. So that's quite a key thing. There's a likelihood that recovery rates from existing conditions or hospital discharge is going to take a lot longer if you're leaving hospital and then having to lie and sit in a cold room. It's not going to make your recovery rate any quicker, so that's for sure. Higher readmission rates possibility as well. And just to sort of stress the seriousness of the issues, the housing health and safety rating system. I think many of you may be familiar with that. And it's a kind of a rank of 29 hazards, category 1 hazards in the house, and cold is pretty much top of the list of those hazards. Reason really being that it's so widespread. We've got sort of 14% of our population or number of households in Britain are in fuel poverty at the moment, which is absolutely shocking, really. So this is a little table. I pulled it out of a fairly old document, actually, 2010. So it might not be the most up to date, but you can see this is the list of the top of the list of those 29 hazards that I was talking about that have been identified as risks in homes. And on the right column, you can see the score rating that they use. So this is a factor of the prevalence of that risk and the consequences of that. So the hazard, and you can see excess cold, second line down, 926, compared to some of the other issues that you might think would be a bit higher, are not so much. And actually that's the highest score. The bottom of the table is there, and you can see falls are appearing in there as well. Pretty high scoring on the falls level side as well. But yeah, not quite as high as 926. Not it's a competition, really. So yeah, so it's a really serious problem. As I say, it's really a factor of the consequence of the fact that so many homes are cold, really. And we see every winter we see sort of 30 to 40,000 excess winter deaths, and we reckon about 30% of that is probably down to cold at home. So it's a really massive problem. And there are interlinks between falls and the coldness. So some of those ailments I was talking about, arthritis, you're gonna stiffen up in a cold house. You're going to be less mobile. It makes you more clumsy, perhaps not as focused in your mind. So there are kind of clear links really between being cold and being at risk of a fall. So yeah, there's sort of interrelationships between those hazards really. So that the HHSRS, as it's abbreviated to, I'm guessing that many of you have come across this, 29 hazards that could lead to harm, and as I say, cold is in the top of that list really. And as I say, it's projected that last year, 14.4% of English and Welsh households were in fuel poverty, which has gone up by a whole percentage in a year, which is pretty astounding, really. Partly a consequence of the energy price crisis. Oops, sorry, gone back. Oh, geez, there we go. Yeah, and it's not really just in extreme weather that we see problems. It's when temperatures outside get down to below 6 degrees, which isn't freezing. We still see impacts of cold. So it's not necessary that it has to be snow on the ground and all iced up. It can just be just cold general winter temperatures that cause the risks. And being housebound is going to increase the exposure to being underheated, and in the winter to the cost of heating it, because you need the heating on for longer. So that's from a nice document there. There's a link there for you. These slides will be shared, so yeah, by all means do check that out. So quick summary, what are the causes of high bills and fuel poverty? High energy costs, as I've touched on. Recent couple of years has been dreadful, really, in terms of pushing the cost of energy up and up. It's more or less doubled. It's beginning to dip, actually. So although it's gone up slightly in January this year, we're hoping that it will go down a bit in April. So a bit of good news, but it's not going to go down to anything like it was, say, 2 years back. So we are still under pressure. There's still going to be massive pressure on households to afford bills and to keep the homes warm. Poor energy efficiency of the home is another factor. So that's our poor housing stock, particularly in the cities. Derby got a lot of terraced housing, solid walled properties, quite a lot of private rented sector homes which may not be very well maintained. Perhaps haven't got loft insulation done, poor drafty windows, that sort of thing. So that energy efficiency factor is really important. And then not using energy efficiently in the home is a key point as well. So we find this particularly perhaps with the refugee population. I understand that they're coming here, they arrive and they don't quite understand the cost of energy, how to maintain a home, a warm home without pushing the thermostat up. But yeah, that sort of knowledge factor is key as well. Not using energy efficiently in the home, and then obviously low income clearly is a factor in terms of affordability of bills. So just a quick summary of the prices at the moment. We're looking at a typical bill going up to £1,928. Prepayment meter customers now on a par with direct debit payment methods, which is an improvement over recent years. So that's less of a handicap these days. But we do tend to recommend, if you can, direct debit payment methods. But it's important to say this isn't a maximum price. This is an average calculated on a sort of typical household, and the more you use, the more you will pay, is what we make a very clear message. Just some unit rates there for our energy. You can see that electricity is about 4 times the price of gas, which is a thing that not everyone is aware of. So when we're talking about heating a home, we tend to steer people away from expensive room heaters that are run on a plug-in electric, because they do cost a lot more per kilowatt than does a gas system. So if somebody's got a nice gas boiler in there, I say nice, it's good for heating, not so good for the planet. But gas is, yeah, as I say, about 7 pence per kilowatt compared to 28. Standing charges have gone up considerably in the recent couple of years as well, which makes an unavoidable cost, even if you're using no energy whatsoever. So yeah, so the little brief summary of what our service offers. Walmer, Derby and Derbyshire, we got a quite substantial grant, £600,000 odd a year or so ago from the government. It's an energy redress funding. So this is the fines that energy companies get levied when they screw up or get caught doing things they shouldn't be doing, and spilling, and that those fines tend to go into a pot for the government recycles around to organisations like us to be able to offer redress, programs that help to correct the mistakes in a way. So we've got another year or so to run on this funding round. So we offer free phone and an email contact, and we can help out with all sorts of billing issues. We can help with advising on efficiency, so behavioural tips, how to get insulation, how to DIY, what sort of boiler settings and radiator adjustments can be, might help somebody to reduce their bills. We can do practical DIY kind of low-cost measures, so draft proofing, bits and pieces like that, lower LED bulbs, and just trying to make a home a little bit more comfortable in a practical way. So that involves home visits. We're happy to do those to people, particularly more vulnerable individuals. We have a little bit of a crisis support that we can offer. Not something that we advertise generally to the public, but if there are cases where perhaps someone is in a no heat situation, then we might be able to help out with a small amount of money just to kind of get a heater in there, or get a boiler serviced and that sort of thing. And then we can advise on grants and the bigger schemes for loft insulation and so on. And we also do drop-in surgeries. So we're trying to run we're working with the refugee centre, as I mentioned, the Bosnia Centre. They have a session regularly, and we've been running one up in Normanton, so people can drop in and find us, talk to us in person, perhaps bring their bills along and discuss their concerns with our energy advisors. And then we can do things like this today, staff briefing. We could perhaps pop into a staff meeting and talk to your staff more generally, and let them know that we're here, and that if we can help out your clients, then we will happily do that. And we do get out and about to events as well. Just a little bit of some of the sources of funding around at the moment for home improvements. There's a scheme called Eco4, aiming really at owner occupiers. Landlords can apply to, has to be in an EPC band D to G. EPC's Energy Performance Certificate. I'm guessing you might know what that is, but if you don't, do drop me a line. I'll pop it in the chat and I'll answer. Or if you're not on benefits, that the householder has a low income of under 31,000 total household income, they may well qualify through the flexible eligibilities arm of the programme, targeting really electrically heated properties for insulation and such like. Connected for Warmth also available. They're tapping into some government money to offer loft and cavity wall insulation and air source heat pumps to replace gas boiler systems, or replacing electric heating systems. So if somebody's on a costly storage heaters or LPG gas, oil systems, then that's an option to consider. And then more generally, there's a Great British Insulation Scheme as well, just to point you at that, which is fairly recently opened up scheme to apply via your energy supplier. And there's some eligibility terms there around the EPC and the household income. Householders might well have to contribute a little bit towards that, depending on the measure that you're after. So there are some options out there to get some work done. So if you've got clients that you think would benefit and you're not sure, then we can perhaps help to get them into something like one of these schemes. So the Great British Insulation Scheme, range of offers there. I think actually the energy suppliers have cherry-picked some of those. You might not be able to get that full range, unfortunately. That's left in the hands of the suppliers, unfortunately. So I can't guarantee that you'd be able to find pitched roof insulation, for instance, from British Gas, or it's a bit of a case of shopping around and hoping that one of them has covered the thing that you need. And then just a quick plug really for a new project that we've got running in partnership with Nottingham Energy Partnership, really aiming at homeowners who perhaps don't qualify for the grants, but would like to get some improvements made, don't quite know where to start, perhaps they would like more information. So we've got a website and a hub there with some case studies, bits of good information, independent, perhaps some links with some of the suppliers and installers. And we're also doing some house energy surveys. So we can come out and look at the home, talk to the householder, and discuss what they would best suit them in terms of what to do first, what sorts of energy heating tech might be most appropriate, and what's most cost effective. So there's a website there if you do think that would be useful, Home Energy Advice Team Hub.uk. And then just to highlight the Priority Service Register, which I think might be well worth you knowing about if you don't already. There are a number of these, and all energy suppliers and the water suppliers have such a register of the more vulnerable clients, really. So anybody on a pension, anybody with any kind of health conditions, really, households with children under 5, or any kind of language barriers, that they are eligible to sign up to this for free. And there's a number of benefits available. Anybody particularly using who has medical equipment that they need to keep cold, for instance, in the fridge, medical medicines or medical equipment that they require power for, that they would be eligible. So yes, as I say, energy suppliers all have a register. S7 Trent has a register, and also the distribution network operator, which is called change its name, National Grid for this part of the world. So National Grid have their own register as well. So it's worth checking those out. As I say, they're free to sign up to, and there isn't any risk of junk mail or something. It's a number of benefits, such as notice of planned interruptions to electricity or water supply, advice on power cuts and what to do, cold weather crisis packs, perhaps. There's a direct number to get through to the network operator in event of an unplanned cut. Special help if you need it from Red Cross emergency organisations. Bills can be sent in Braille or other languages, and then there's options of passwords for for engineers when they're coming out, just to be reassuring and keep householders safe. So that's really quite well. It's well worth getting people signed up to that, and it helps the suppliers know who on their customer base is a more vulnerable customer. So it helps them to understand what they need to be putting into place as well. Not everybody who is on that register, not everybody who is eligible to be on the register is as now. So, and they're keen to get those registers as up to date as they can. Just a couple of tips, really, thoughts on smart meters and more vulnerable people who are perhaps susceptible to falls. Smart meters would avoid the need for people to be accessing meters where they're perhaps more difficult to get to. We often go out to homes and find that the meter is in some awkward cupboard under the sink or in the back of a airing cupboard or somewhere, and they can't get to it. So they're balancing on chairs to try and read the meter. Really not ideal. So in which case they may be, particularly if they're on the priority service register, be eligible for free installation of a smart meter, which would actually avoid the need for reading a meter at all. And meter readings are really important in terms of keeping bills, keeping on top of bills. We find a lot of people who haven't provided meter readings and their bills are out of date, which means they're either massively in credit and they don't realise that they're owed money, or they're massively in debt and suddenly they get a big bill lands on the mat for thousands of pounds, just because their meter readings are out of kilter. Where smart meters aren't workable, they may be able to remove particularly a prepayment meter to somewhere that's more usable. Obviously with a prepayment meter, certainly the older ones, you need to kind of access it with your key, and if it's in some awkward spot, it's really not helpful. Or they may be able to provide a meter reader to come out and get those readings on a regular basis, where they understand that there's a need to do that. So those are the links for the Cadent, which is who run the gas network, and the National Grid, which is the distributor network for electricity. Those are the links for the register there. A couple of tips, and we're doing for time. Turn down the flow on the radiators, save quite a bit of money. Reducing electric shower times particularly saves quite a lot of money. There's some numbers there. But insulation is the key message for us. Insulation, and check out the grants. Some more tips there. I'll let you read through those in your own time. By all means, download that, print it off. If you want some copies, get in touch and we'll see what we can do. A load more. I'm rushing through these because I've overrun. Yeah, some nice little devices there that are kind of cheap. Heat the human, not the home. So if you've got somebody in the house who's particularly vulnerable, but not everybody else wants the heating at 22 degrees, these little things could be the solution in terms of fairly cheap ways of keeping an individual warm. And those are our contact details if you do want to get back to us. I should say just at the bottom there, my colleague Claire Woolley will be taking over the running of this project as of really this next couple of weeks or so. So by all means, message either of us, but Claire in the future should be the main contact. And that's the referral number and the referral email too. So yeah, we'll take referrals. Individuals can ring up and contact us directly if they wish to. And that is the end, I think.
That's great. Thank you, Peter. Thanks very much for that. It's really, really useful. And we've just got a couple of minutes now for questions. So if anybody does have a question that they wanted to ask Peter in relation to his presentation or the support, feel free to pop your hand up, use the raise your hand function, or if anyone wants to be brave and unmute themselves, now is a couple of minutes for us just to take any questions for Peter. I've just got one, Peter, whilst people are maybe, oh, there you go, Danny's come in. Great. Danny, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sure. Peter, thanks for presenting that. I'm particularly interested in asking you actually, because although I'll be presenting next myself anyway, but I wanted to ask you, you talked around doing almost like pop-up events essentially, and one of the big things we're actually looking to do within the work that we do, and I'll be explaining that shortly, is essentially offering pop-up events for people in our localities that are living in our wards in Derby City. And it'd be really great, and if you might be able to come in and pop in, actually do some of those surgeries for people, having that opportunity for those that might want that extra information. So I think I'd be looking to maybe get in touch with you. I just wanted to get an idea as to how often do you generally look to do those across the city? Is it that often or regular?
Yeah, we do a kind of regular sort of monthly session at the refugee centre, and then sort of a weekly drop in at the Sahara office that I mentioned. But we're happy to come and do other pop-up things. We get bits of, we have sort of objectives within various projects, and we can often cover it, through those to just kind of helps us tick boxes in that sense. But keen to get out and talk to people, and so yeah, it's very possible that we could do that. I couldn't really give you numbers particularly at the moment in terms of how frequent, but yeah, by all means, let's have a chat and see what we can sort out. Yeah.
Thanks, Danny. Does anybody else have any burning questions for Peter? That's great. If nobody does, so we are going to share Peter's slides afterwards, and we will share some information about some of the City Council housing support that's in place as well. So people might be familiar with the Healthy Housing Hub. We'll share a little bit of information around some of the City Council services as well afterwards as Peter's slides. And if anybody wants to get in touch with Peter, obviously you've got his contact details for himself or Claire afterwards as well. Thanks very much for that, Peter. You can stop sharing your screen when you're ready. That's great. Really appreciate that. I'm going to pass over to Ella, who's helping me facilitate the session today. Ella's going to introduce our next presentation.
Hi, my name's Ella. I'm a physio working with Team Up. I wanted to introduce Danny, who's one of the locality managers for Locality 4 in Derby City. The locality team mainly focus on sort of community safety and locality working, but Danny himself has been a local area coordinator, so sort of has extensive background in frailty, falls and older people. So over to you, Danny.
Thanks, Ella. Bear with me while I get this up. Is everyone right for seeing that?
Yeah, we can see that, Danny.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'm Danny. I'm one of what will be 5 locality managers for Derby City Council. I suppose I'll give a bit of a history, because our team now, our large team actually, is quite new. It's still only around 6 to 7 months old, I would say, and it's forged essentially from 3 different teams originally, one being local area coordination, which I'll go into a lot more detail later about, although I imagine perhaps quite a few on our meeting today are likely to have heard of local area coordination. Another being public protection as a second team, and the third being what was previously known as neighbourhoods. So you'd have a neighbourhood officer and a neighbourhood manager, but is now known, and the role has been adapted to be locality officer alongside the locality managers that I myself am. The idea was pulling together 3 teams that are, as it says on the slide, a core team of officers that are focused around supporting citizens, their friends, their family, with the view of building upon a vision together, being alongside residents in the communities and trying to build resilient and more independent communities. And it's based upon the vision, which is just at the bottom there. Every person in Derby should be able to live in a place they call home, with the people and things that they love, doing the things that matter to them as a part of a community where they look out for one another. To give a bit of an idea of the layout, we have 5 localities, as I mentioned, 5 localities that cover 18 electoral wards. It was previously 17, but there's been a bit of a change on the electoral side. So Chaddeston and Weston East have been separated as it was previously Chaddeston. There was also once well, quite a number of different style of wards, but there's been quite a few changes on that front. So as I say, there's 18 wards. There are local area coordinators situated in every single ward. In total, there are 21 local area coordinators that work for Derby City Council. As I mentioned, so there's 18 that cover all 18 wards, 1 in each ward. We have one that essentially is based in the city centre. We also have one that is based at the hospital. That role I'll actually go into a little bit further on down the line. And then we also have one local area coordinator that we've started to branch out now into Derbyshire, actually. So they are based in Hilton, Melbourne and Wellington, which also covers the Mercia Marina area. I mentioned around public protection officers. We currently have 7. Eventually we will have 10. And in terms of locality officers, we have 7 of those as well. We're quite a large team. There's about, if you then include the 5 locality managers, I think there's in and around 40 to 50 people across the whole. And we're separated, as I say, across those 5 localities. You can see each one kind of made up there. The locality that I kind of lead on essentially is this one just here, Blaegreaves, Littleover and Mickleover. I was previously the local area coordinator for Blaegreaves, which is just in this little area, this pocket just here. Just to give a bit of a quick rundown of the role. So myself being the locality manager, we're generally responsible for the strategic level of the locality plans and working alongside our partners across the locality plans that we've essentially formed together as a community. Locality officer, they are essentially looking to focus on those locality plans and enable that joint working with the community leaders, the partners that have been identified. So again, that would be the residents, community leaders, councillors, local organisations, services, and much like the people that are no doubt viewing today. Public protection officers, that's a different style of role entirely in many ways. So it's more around enforcement, it's around ensuring that people feel safe, that environmental crimes such as littering, fly tipping, dog fouling and antisocial behaviour of the lower level is overseen and kept in check and enforced. And they do, of course, have a certain level of power to enforce on that, ranging from things like CPWs to, which is a community protection warning, to the next stage being a notice. And they again also look to work with partners to support community safety and essentially understanding local concerns in the neighbourhood, and they would feed back on that at various neighbourhood forums or boards, which communities are obviously more than welcome to attend alongside councillors. While I'm on that topic, actually, it's probably worth me mentioning that each ward has around £15,000, depending on the number of councillors. Most wards will have 3 councillors that are elected in, so they have £15,000 that can be spent on things within the ward, and applications can be sent to neighbourhood boards for anything essentially, but in particular it may be around community-based activities that groups are wanting to do, whether they might be charity groups or warm space groups, as an example, will often fill out applications wanting to have support to support those that attend their sessions. Local area coordinators, I'll touch on them next. I'll go into them in much greater detail shortly, but the idea of them is to essentially walk alongside individuals at a one-to-one level with a stronger idea of preventing, reducing or delaying the need for formal and expensive services, which is how I particularly had an interest in Falls, but also how we ended up moving into this as our locality group, because we have very particular priorities that we're looking to achieve around supporting the health and social care services, and a big part of that is around the support done by local area coordinators and locality officers. But the main part within the local area coordinator, LAC, I'm going to start using LAC because I could be here all day if I keep saying local area coordinator, so I'll call them LACs. The big idea around them is essentially, you know, looking to support people, looking to support communities, and looking to build that community resilience and independence. So I've mentioned locality plans already. We pretty much got started on these right away. So I mentioned earlier that we started around 6 to 7 months ago. the three teams essentially came together and we brought our own experiences, our own knowledge of our areas, using the examples of LACs. The majority of the team have been in their posts in each ward for three and a half years and above. Some have been in their roles for 8-9 years within their communities. So there's quite a wealth of experience that was brought to the table. For many of the locality officers, again, many of them have been in their areas for years as well. Although in some areas they may have been moved anew because of the changes and the shifts around in the approach. Alongside that, we've of course have looked at data, we've engaged with local community, we did a range of pop-up events that kind of started in the summer, and we continue to do those in order to understand concerns across the community and what people want to do, what their aspirations are, what's important to them, and to get a bit of a sense of the climate in terms of the mood across the community as well. And then alongside key partners and partners across the whole really, so it can be community leaders, services, organisations, councillors, and we've all kind of looked at drawing together this 5 sets of locality plans that cover the 18 wards, producing that draft based on the key themes that we've identified together. And where I would say we probably are in terms of this actual circle is we're around that co-designing working document aspect. We've now started to draw up a good strong plan, which I'll start to share some of the priorities with you shortly. And I'm more than happy to send over our current plan, and I'd be absolutely chuffed for anyone that would wish to give any kind of feedback on that and give any extra information at the end of this as well. I'll happily send it over. Just please, drop me an email or let me know, and I'll look at sending it. The idea of the plan is it's going to be a living, breathing document. So whilst it will be certainly eventually online on our webpage, it will be something that we always look to adapt, because at the end of the day, communities change. I'm going to share just a few interesting stats or bits of data that kind of came up when we were drawing up our plan and looking through the data. And not all of it will directly, let's say, relate to falls or even the expected data that you may accumulate alongside it. But one interesting one for the particular area that we look to support, which is locality 4. So I mentioned earlier Blagrew's, Little Over, Mickleover, is the number of people that are aged 0 to 19 living in households of relative or absolute poverty. If I just flash your eyes across to that far right box, in Blagrew's in particular, 61% of 0 to 19-year-olds living in households are either living amongst absolute or relative poverty. Absolute poverty, you could describe it as essentially struggling to meet ends meet, struggling to pay for bills, and arguably put food on the table. Relative poverty being essentially having to buy or struggling to buy things new. So it may be secondhand purchases or new pair of shoes, secondhand pair of shoes as an example. So you can see from that, obviously Blagrew's being at 61%, Little Over at 27, and Mickleover at 22. This was a particularly interesting one that starts to come more into our falls category when you consider, and certainly on the next few. So interestingly, across our locality, the majority, and I should mention, Derby's average in terms of those with disability under the Equality Act essentially is at 18.7%. Now, when you look at the percentages across the localities, they're actually all under that mark of 18.7%. But when you start to look a little bit closer under the magnifying glass, you can begin to see that there are a few areas, a few LSOAs, so lower super output area. What a lower super output area is essentially if you take a ward and you almost divide it up into slice of a pie, call it 4, 5, 6 slices, they're in little sections. So these are very much smaller areas, smaller aspects. And there are some key areas where, in particular, you'll notice here, so Vicarage Road area in Mickleover, it is well above the average in terms of disability, which is 18.7 in Derby, it's at 26.4%. And one key data for those, again, I'm not going to, reach to those that already kind of, are following in the same way, but with age, as is expected, generally comes more falls in terms of that whole use it or lose it kind of style of things. when you compare the population averages, so ages 55 to 85 and over, our average percentage across our locality for the three wards is 34.5%, which is in comparison to Derby at 27.6, which is about 6.9% higher. And from the ages of 55 straight through to 85 and over, for a kind of 5-year bracket of each, so 55 to 60 to 65, etc., there's generally a 1% increase as well as you go through, which would of course correlate with that. Which, when you compare it with many of the other wards across the city, our ward generally, or our three wards generally, tend to hold a higher average as a result. So I've touched on kind of a bit of the data and of course the idea of how we put together the plans. These are our locality priorities. So we've got 3 clear priorities that have been drawn up or put together through the conversations that we've had with everybody, but also through the themes that have come through and also the data as well. I'll start with the first one essentially, which is around supporting social opportunities. That's also around isolation too, which is a thought that I've kind of considered a lot more recently. And a big part that we're looking to do on that is we've started building and we've begun meeting all together partnership networks, and each one is formed within each ward. So there's one for Blakebury's, one for Mickleover and one for Littleover, and my colleagues will be doing the same across the other 5 localities, or other 4, sorry. The idea of the partnership networks is we come together with the view of having a vested interest of supporting the wider community in whatever shape or form that is. And we support each other with our own events, we support each other to raise awareness, and we would support each other to support those in our communities at the end of the day. Alongside that, we've been looking to identify and support localised hubs, ones that may be aspiring to be localised hubs, ones that may already be localised community hubs, and trusted hubs as well in particular, with the view of building alongside them and the community to create trusted spots for people to go to have conversations, hold warm spaces, get hold of real important information to them, whether it might be around health, it might be debt support, it might be support around Warmer Derbyshire, let's say, which is why I was particularly interested in asking that question earlier, Peter. The idea of it essentially, having a clear and obvious place that everybody knows about, that they can go to if they just need a little bit of support, however that might look. And we've started doing some extra supporting work alongside that, which there's an idea around perhaps doing a community newsletter that will go out, as well as a hospital leavers pack, which I'll go into in a bit more detail shortly. The second aspect is the support of health and social care services. Now, this has been a key one anyway that's come down from the council. The medium-term financial plan from Derby City Council, I think it will be due to close actually, but I'd encourage everybody to actually have a look on the link. If you search it on Google or even just on the Derby City Council website, you can have a look at the medium-term financial plan. There are some suggestions around changes to adult social care and social care packages that may be key in terms of falls, which it's worth having a good read through. But the key things that we're looking to do are around, and it's supported essentially through the work that we're already doing with the partnership network and the community hubs, which is around providing opportunities at the trusted spaces and hopefully within their homes in terms of newsletters for people to get the information that they need, again, whether it be for health or for local groups, the key groups that support mental health, physical health, and with regards to falls, I know, Alistair, you shared with us recently, which I'm certainly going to share our future partnership network, which is actually tomorrow for Blakebury's, around the falls. There are a number of falls activity groups that take place across our localities, and I'm going to be looking to share that in our next partnership network, which, as I say, is taking place tomorrow. But one key one that I'm particularly interested in is improving the hospital to home. This is how I'm terming it, the hospital to home to community integration pathway, which key part of that has been through our colleague at who is based, one of the local area coordinators that is based at the hospital. There are already fantastic pathways that have already been set up from the various partners and groups that exist anyway, from the hospital to home. But the key part is trying to support an individual once they get home and once they're back there, what next? what's out there in the community, what support is already there, how can we ensure that they feel confident that when they're going to look to get out and go from, when you consider that someone could have had a fall, they may have fractured a hip or broken a leg, it's quite a long time frame to have gone from being in hospital to laid up to sat back down. They may have had care packages in place, various things, to then getting back out to what may be a new type of life for them, something that they need to adapt to based on an injury that may have occurred, or getting back to the old or the previous things that were the case before they had their fall. And then the third part, which is mainly around empowering community voice. And again, it comes back to ensuring or trying to create better conversation, better communication and better collaboration, ensuring that everybody gets the information they need from the various services and playing our part in that, giving platforms, providing pop-up events, and inviting our partners to come and take place, those from the partnership networks, and allowing the community to speak to the relevant services. And that doesn't necessarily even mean whether it be from health, it can be from traffic, for example, or highways, or whomever it might be, but ensuring that the community get the opportunity to have their voice heard. I'm going to just put the magnifying glass into local area coordination, purely because that's where a lot of the work currently stands around falls, with the rest of it certainly being developed alongside our colleagues that are locality officers. So why I want to talk about local area coordination is because of the adaptability of local area coordination in the situations that arise for anybody, really. It doesn't necessarily have to be falls. So local area coordination has been in the city for around about 10, pushing towards 15 years now. I mentioned earlier that essentially there's one across every ward in the city. The way in which somebody can be referred to or introduced to a local area coordinator is very simple, that there's no massive criteria. The idea is that you could essentially call the local area coordinator for the local area, and so long as you've essentially got consent or permission from that individual, look to introduce them to that LAC. Once that kind of first contact's been made, they would look to understand that person, understand their vision, what it is they want to do, and the bigger picture within their life. They may have several things going on that are important to him, but there may be a bigger picture that they're looking to achieve. The LAC would look at setting about or creating a shared agreement with that person. It may sound like a business contract, it's not. It's essentially what is it do you want to do? How are we going to look at doing this together? And it's something that just helps that person to really empathize to the local area, or emphasize, sorry, to the local area coordinator, what it is they want to do, and for them to work out how they're going to do it together. They look to build alongside that person their strengths and their skills and their gifts, and help them to understand them too, because sometimes we can forget the skills and gifts that we possess and how we can use them to build that life that we want to have at the end of the day, and support others as well. Essentially, the next stage is around sharing the information that they have with the LAC, because they are their own leader in their own life. You could be the most qualified person alive at the end of the day for whatever the given context, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a coach, whether you're whatever it is, but you don't know that person and you don't know that life. They are their own leader, and they're the best person to make their own decision at the end of the day. The next key part essentially is around being able to support them in finding that key information. So in this context, it might be finding where their local postural stability class is, or their local chair-based exercise class, let's say for an individual who's had a fall. It might be a peer support group to support them as they look to get back into the swing of things, or making local friends in the area, building community networks, whether that be, again, heading to a local coffee morning, or understanding what organisations or services in the area, and giving that person that voice essentially. Many people, especially if they've had a fall, they can have quite the shake up and can suffer a lack of confidence. Many will term it fear of falling. And that can really lead to someone going from a person that's highly sociable, will go out and be involved in just about everything, and I've known one or two across the years in my previous role as a LAC, to essentially being stuck in the home because they may not feel confident even walking to their door, even getting into a taxi or onto the bus. And it also may not be financially viable. So it's trying to help them and be alongside them and figuring that out too. Before eventually essentially taking action, being alongside them to figure that out, putting into practical applications and contributing to their community, how they feel comfortable in doing so. Again, it might be becoming a localised volunteer, it might be anything at the end of the day. And the final point on that essentially is sharing that knowledge, that wealth of information that the LAC has learned alongside colleagues from the public protection team and from the locality officer, and from the individuals that they support with the services, with the organisations that fit around, that are our partners, that are part of the wider scoping system and picture. So I obviously mentioned that local area coordination has been around for a good 10, maybe even 15 years now. It actually originally started in Australia way back in the 80s or 90s, actually. But there's quite a lot of evidence around the successes around it. It leads to increased value in informal support and relationships, improved access for information, increasing the capacities for families to continue in caring roles. It essentially supports the person to feel more assured, more independent and more resilient, and families the wider network when introduced into a local area coordinator. What I guess I want to touch on next is the role of the hospital LAC. So normally within the role of a local area coordinator, they're based in every single ward in the city. But this particular LAC is based at the hospital. It's a gentleman named Rajiv Nath. And the idea of the role was to support the discharge and helping for the facilitation of a discharge of those that have come into hospital. So anyone essentially that has a fall will often come into contact with Raj or with the LAC in the post essentially. They would get to know that individual at the hospital and they would look to introduce them to the relevant services on a shorter term basis, and essentially look to support the discharge, but also support the longer term pattern or longer term future for that person. So many of the services that they may look to liaise with will be the local housing associations, Disability Direct, local volunteer groups, or the local area coordinators, because it might be that that person will be discharged from the hospital, find themselves at home, and of course they'll have the support of rapid response, various care packages put in, but then of course there's the wider situation in which that person would want to consider. So it's helped to provide quite a strong position at the hospital for an LAC to get to understand that person, pass that person then onto the LAC in which of the ward that they live in, and then the LAC on the other side pick things up from there and look to support them as they carry on, essentially look to become look to move back into their previous lifestyle or adapt to a new one in whatever way that takes form. And some of the themes, so that role's been that work has been going on for a good year now, actually. So we have managed to do a bit of an evaluation of that role and some of the themes that have been reoccurring that have been preventing discharge. And some of them, we have three key themes around them essentially. So you have your housing conditions that ranges from hoarding to safety to adaptations within the home, safeguarding and cost. And certainly in some of those situations, it can hold back the discharge for weeks, which then puts things back for the individual when they get home, and it can make them feel less confident when they are there. Their support networks may start to dwindle, or their confidence in their support networks start to dwindle more. And of course, as a result, their mental health and well-being will change and may start to lessen also, which is a big part then for providing the network through the LAC at the hospital, and then of course liaising with colleagues, whomever it might be. It could be social prescribers or LACs, or it could be rapid response. It's an entire range. And then of course speaking to adult social care around care packages. But as I say, that these are some of the reoccurring themes that have come up that do tend to hamper discharges from the hospital and have hampered when introducing into the community from the information that we've gathered. I just wanted to give a quick case study because I'm just conscious of the time. So Alan was essentially a gentleman that had a fall, and this was a little while ago.